Hello, hello, hello. It is Thursday, May the 8th, and that means, and it's 12 noon, actually, it's 12:05. I'm a little bit late today because I'm in a new place. I am not at my home. I am in a WeWork space. And you know what it's like when you're in some place new and you got to get used to all the surroundings and all the bells and whistles. So I'm late today. But today is Thursday, and it's noon, and it means it's time for Let's Talk Power Live. I am Dr. Tanji, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. And I am the CEO and principal consultant of Liaison Educational Partners. We are in the business of supporting educators because we believe every student deserves an excellent education. So we are about the business of ensuring every child has access to and receives a leader and an educator at every level with the mindset, skill set, resources, and tools so they can deliver that excellent education that students deserve. Please go ahead and learn more about us at liaisoneducationalpartners.org. That is our website, and it gives you all of the information you need to know about who we are and what we do. And before we go any further, I want to invite you to to subscribe, to share, and leave us a comment on our channel. We are new to YouTube. We are growing our channel. We are looking for more ways to spread the knowledge and to spread the word about instructional power. And we're going to get into that through all of the sessions we provide every week, every Thursday. But your comments, your partnership is what gives us the information we need to keep moving. So that is who I am. That is what I do. Go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this, and leave me a comment to let me know what you think. I want to learn from you as you learn from me. Let's go ahead and get started with our time today. We're going to actually talk, I'm going to do it this way. We're going to actually talk a lot about patterns before pressure. You know, as well as I do, we are in the throes of testing season. And from being in the classroom, being at the district level, supporting principals, supporting educators, particularly those at the middle school level, this is a stressful time. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of panicking, but we also know that this can be a really empowering, agency fomenting, agency building time for educators as well as for our students. So we're going to spend this week looking at seeing what's in the data and seeing what really matters so we can really assuage some of that panic and pressure that we're feeling. And believe me, I was there with you and I felt it too. So let's go ahead and get started. Before anything, you know, if you've been watching me over these last few weeks, it's been almost a year. If you know anything, you know I'm going to ask you, do you have a copy of our book, Understanding Your Instructional Power, Curriculum and Language Decisions to Support Each Student? That book is about 3 years old now. I cannot believe it. It's 3 years old. It's in circulation. Here is what people say. I read your book and the toothpaste is out of the tube. I am really seeing my educational environment through a different set of lenses. That's what one person said, one principal in an elementary school building. Another leader actually said, I never looked at my environment through this lens. It is eye-opening. And that was a lady who leads a charter school in the Northeast. So get the book. Let's be in conversation. There's a QR code. Let me see if I can get the banner up on here. Not yet. We can make that available to you, but make sure that you get your instructional power understanding at your book so we can be in conversation. You can really learn where it's coming from. Some of the work we do at Liaison Educational Partners is around a 5-phase partnership process. We invite our partners to do 5 things in an iterative cycle. First, we want them to spend some time learning about their environment. We as educators are doers. You're going to see me get up, and I'm in this place where if I don't stand up, the lights are going to shut off. I don't want to shut off. But we are in the business of doing. And sometimes we do before we learn. So our team invites our partners to do some strategic learning. And then we take that learning and we create strategic plans. And from those plans, we put in place an application process, an evaluation process, and an integration process. At the end of the day, we want our partners integrating the strategies, the strategic moves that yield the best return on their investment in the work and partnerships that we have. That all starts from the learning lens. So that's where our strategic movement happens. And so, as I said, it's testing season. It's that time of year where we stop and we get into getting information. We are learning right now in this season what students know and what they are able to do from an entire year's worth of instructional time. But we also know that there really needs to be a belief shift in how we approach this season of time. We know that the old beliefs about testing are that testing is high stakes, it is demanding, it can also be disconnected to the kinds of learning that students may have done throughout the course of the year. And what we want to lean into this idea that testing actually can be empowering. Testing can be agency building. Testing can be an opportunity for students to be empowered and be partners in the learning. But that takes a belief shift. It takes strategic movement in our minds to go from the old set of beliefs into a new set of beliefs. That is the work that I've been talking about over the last few weeks, and I'm going to keep talking about over the coming weeks, so that students can be in an environment that testing becomes not just a thing that they have to sit in a row through, but something they can actually learn from. Testing happens from the moment a child enters the space of the world, right? The first thing a baby gets done is they get measured. I remember when my children were born, they got this thing called an APGAR score. It was a life viability score. And we were blessed that our babies had high viability scores. And that gives you some baseline information, but it wasn't their whole story. And the challenge with data as a number is that it becomes a single story, and a lot of young people get pigeonholed based upon the number that pops up. And that's part of the old belief. But we want to make a shift in our mind and get to a new belief. And so what's been happening a lot in education is we've been doing a lot of dripping. So last week, I introduced the concept of drip, meaning data rich and information poor. What does that mean? It means there is information everywhere. We get data, we have interim assessments, we have summative assessments, we have curriculum assessments, we have all kinds of assessments that yield numerical results. That's the data. But we stop a lot of times at the information side when what we need is to have more than just data. So we're data rich with lots and lots and lots of numerical data. What we are missing, though, is information that gives us a total picture of a child, because when they take those assessments, they give us information, but they also give us information on a moment in time and not so much a full spectrum. I remember when I was in the classroom, I had young people who would come to school on test day hungry. And you know, as an adult, if you are hungry, your mind is focused on its most basic need, and that at the moment is food. And it's not going to lean into you doing the important work of maybe finishing a project, of maybe being present in a meeting. We've all heard that term hangry. We're hungry and angry at the same time. Well, if a young person comes to school and they are hungry or they had a bad morning, the data that we get back in the numbers might present information that doesn't give us the full story. So, yes, we have a lot of information coming at us. My position is we have to do more than just rely on the numbers. We have to get into and get past our pattern problem. When I say get into it, we have to realize that we've got one. We have a pattern problem and we have to get past it because we have to be willing to not let the numbers be the single story of our students' lives. We've all heard, not all, I don't want to say all, many of us have heard the idea of a single story. Chamamana, I want to say her name right. I will not say her name incorrectly. I don't want to disrespect her that way. The problem of a single story is real. And we want to make sure that when we get our data out, that we are leaning into one, what the numbers tell us. But we also want to spend some work and some time looking at what the data doesn't say to us. And there's a lot that the numbers don't say. A book came out a few years back called Street Data. And in the Street Data book, the writers talked a lot about how to get close to the ground and get behind the numbers so that as a leader at the district level, the building level, the state level, and at the classroom level, you can get more information from the data so you can be information rich as well as data rich. And we have a pattern problem because our data tends to be narrowly focused, narrowly defined, and stereotype confirming. We see disparate numbers, we see patterns across the data where certain groups of students constantly remain at the quote unquote bottom while certain other groups remain at the top. And if we lean only into critical characteristics and ideas that can help us with our instruction, so our construction can be more valuable and our instruction can be responsive. So that's the data problem that we have, a pattern problem that really is leaning into the narrow way in which we see students. And we need to really figure out how to get past that problem. So here are some pressure points that we're seeing in the data. Number one, confusion and not clarity. If you, as a classroom educator, have not had the benefit of a leader who spends time investing in your data literacy, when the number comes out, you're going to have a lot of numbers, but you're going to have confusion and you may not have clarity. That's a pressure point. Additionally, the pressure to respond without time to reflect. That's another pressure point. Asking a classroom teacher, and I was one of those, and really fell into some traps very early in my career, looking at numbers and making very, very quick decisions. That is not necessarily the way to go. I needed to spend time talking to my students. I had to build my own data literacy. There are times in my career where my data literacy development was upon me because I had leaders who were not well versed themselves. And some of us are in those positions. So my data literacy, I had to build my own. And in building my own data literacy, developing my own data literacy, I was able to spend time getting to the quote unquote street level to learn from my students what they were really challenged by in their content. Sometimes it wasn't a skill. Sometimes it was like I released a few weeks back, they, in our sort of item assessments that we had, I really was able to walk them through a deep level of development of their own data understanding and their own data literacy, whereby they were able to dig into the kind of mistakes they made. So in developing my own, I was able to develop theirs. And together we were able to avoid the pressure point of making decisions based upon numbers only, really digging into that. And then patterns often hide behind averages, right? We get what's called an aggregate number, and we often miss the nuance when we stop at the aggregate level and we don't look at disaggregated data. In modern times, a lot of us have been through the No Child Left Behind legislation, and we are still living in that. Things may change pretty rapidly given the current climate in which we find ourselves. However, one of the things that happened during the No Child Left Behind was disaggregated data became really paramount. We really dug into, how different groups of students were performing, comparatively speaking, to the whole. And if we go back to really leaning into the aggregate only, we will miss critical aspects of how to support educators, to support young people. And that's a leadership conversation to be had. But we really want to make sure that we avoid that pressure point, because if we lean into it, if we only stop at the aggregate level, we will be missing critical data. So that is a pressure point in what's happening now in this current climate of what do we do with all of the data that's coming at us? How can we avoid the pressure points that we receive? So one of the things we want to do is we want to begin to think like a strategist. How do we do that? We think like a strategist when we, number one, look at trends across student groups, like I said, the disaggregation of data. We think like a strategist when we look at shifts over time, when we look at gaps between skill areas or question types, really looking at question types that might be layered questions, multi-step questions, both in reading and in other content areas. We are accustomed to multi-step questions in math. But there are times when young people are asked multi-step questions in science, in history, in their ELA classes. So how do we help determine if an error is based upon knowledge or skill or question type? And then we want to look for outliers or our own blind spots. And then we want to look for sources, a varied amount of sources. We want to look at qualitative and quantitative data. We want to have a mixed methods approach to data analysis. We want all of the concrete, quote unquote, hard data. And we want to couple that hard data with qualitative data. So that is what we definitely want to make sure we are doing when we get our ability to think like a strategist. So how do we go from drip, data rich, information poor, to where we are driving with our data? Let's take a look at what this could look like. So we need to change our data analysis lens, whereby we really are driving with our data. So here's what we're looking for. We want to look for a way to ask more nuanced questions. We want to shift beliefs. We want to focus on learning, and we want to build learner agency. So when we talk about drive, here is what we're talking about. We're looking for data that's responsible, it is responsive, it is instructionally focused, it is valuable, and it is empowering. Empowering most to students. Right now, the way data comes out to young people, it comes out to them just as here is your number. You were either a level 4, a level 3, a level 2, or a level 1. I've been there, so I know. That's not empowering to a kid. In fact, if anything, it is disenfranchising because it is highly reductive. Reducing a child to a number 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever the number scale your state has, your district has, putting that information out to a child is not enough to help them learn and grow. It is a limited, reductive way of understanding what they know, understand, or can do. So, what should happen? What's next? So, in the drive, this is the question sets. As I said, ask nuanced questions, be empowering. Here's what we want to look at from the leader side. Are you using data in ways that preserve student dignity and build trust across your school community? Have you clearly defined the purpose behind each type of data that you collect? Learned recently, there's a state, lots of states, not any one state, a state out there has 22 different types of assessments. And the assessments don't necessarily talk to each other. Imagine what that does to a district, to a school, to an educator in a classroom, but most importantly to a kid. What does it do to have those many disparate, non-connected or disconnected data avenues, right? Are we balancing quantitative assessments and qualitative? Are we getting down to the street level? That's on the leader side. Are we protecting against over-identification or stereotypical labeling? That's a real question, a big question. And then, have I supported coaches? Have coaches and educators been supported in building students' data literacy and agency? A lot of times not. But then as a coach or a teacher, what story is this data trying to tell, right? What is being left out? Have they explained the data sets to the students? And as a coach, specifically to a coach, have you created opportunities to build educator data literacy? When I was working with a client many years ago in North Carolina, they had a PLC system and they had multi-level classroom leaders. And my work, I was hired to partner with the multi-classroom leaders, and together we strategize on how to build educator data literacy, because we want to build educator agency, but we can't do that if all of the data knowledge rests at the coach and above level. So as an MCL, I was hired, like I said, to partner with them in doing that kind of work, was able to really help that multi-classroom leader support their actual classroom leaders in building data literacy. And then as a student, does the student understand what this data even means? Do they know how it was collected? Have they thought more beyond just the numbers? And can they answer questions about what to ask about the data? That is a critical way, a critical example of understanding this shift in mindset between old beliefs and new beliefs, so data can really look into patterns and avoid the pressure that causes panic. And that's what we really want to be about. So let's talk about driving. Here's a data sample. Want you to consider this data. Group of students were asked some questions, and here's one of the questions. Here's the prompt. I feel known and supported at school. Here's a 5-point scale. Overall, all students had a 3.8. Now, students with IEPs had a 2.9. Asian students had a 3.2, and students with chronic absenteeism had a 2.5. Now, if we stopped at these numbers, we would simply start moving into action, action, action. What am I going to do? Go get all the absentee students, go do all this. Go do, call them all together, put them in the auditorium and say, you know what? If you don't come to school, you're going to fail. That has happened. I've been in schools where after a leader has looked at their chronic absenteeism data, the numbers alone, their response to that was to call an assembly of all of the students who had been chronically absent and give them what I would call the riot act about coming to school. On the flip side, they would get all of the students together who were not chronically absent and reward them for coming. That's your PBIS reward system that's in place. That has its place. It has a purpose. Unfortunately, it does very little to really get at why the students who are chronically absent are in fact chronically absent. There's a bigger story there, right? So what would that look like if we were driving? Let's drive on this data, right? That is responsible, instructionally valuable, and empowering. What would happen? These are the questions that would be asked. You would ask that group of chronically absent students, what is going on? We would help them as a leader build that data. We would ask the students as students, we would tell them how that data was collected. We would help them understand more than just the numbers. We would be asking them, why might you be coming to school or not coming to school? We would be looking into how our systems track their attendance. We would be asking them what is necessary in the learning environment so that they want to come to school. I had, when I was an educator in 8th grade in the South, I had a young man who would come to school 1 week. He would come to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The following week, he would come to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is looking at the patterns. And after seeing this pattern, I went to 2 groups. I went to the counselor and I went to the principal. And I said, here is the pattern. Here are the numbers I am seeing. Let's have a conversation with this young man who was exceptionally bright, but he would fall into that 2.5 being seen survey data because maybe he didn't feel like he was being seen. And what we did was we had a conversation with him to learn about why he was coming to school in that pattern. It turns out he was helping his parent with his younger sibling. He had a parent who his absences tracked his parent's work schedule. And since he was in a single parent home and he was the oldest, he was responsible. He was taking the lead on helping his parent with his younger siblings, which negatively impacted his own school presence data. So we worked out with him and his parent a way to stem the tide of his absenteeism and improve his attendance. That's what looking at the combination of the quantitative data and the qualitative data can get you. Really driving, right? We were responsible with our data. We were making sure that we were being responsive to it and that what we were coming up were instructionally valuable and empowering strategies to support this young man in coming to school so that he could then know he was seen and valued at school. That's what driving with data is all about. So, what's next? What's next is I'm going to show this because this is very exciting. Over the next coming weeks, I am going to be releasing a suite of drive tools. They're going to be tools focused for leaders, focused for educators and coaches, and focused for students. It's going to be a 3-set tool whereby you can really dig into driving the data so you can, again, avoid the pressure that leads to panic, and you can stop the drip. We want to stop the drip. We want to drive instead of drip. So this is what's next. A suite of these tools is coming up, and I am thrilled to share it with you. And leave me a comment if you are interested in obtaining these drip and drive tools. So what else is on our docket? Let's recap for our time today. What did we talk about? We realized that data requires multiple lenses. You must have more than one lens in your data if you want to go from drip to drive. Next, we said data is an opportunity to build agency, educator agency, as well as student agency. We keep saying we want students at the center, making sure our students are equipped and have the knowledge necessary to make sense of their own data is a critical way to build their agency. Then we said looking for patterns before the pressure rises, reduces the panic. The pressure is going to rise. But if we know how to look for critical patterns, we will be able to avoid the panic that comes from the pressure. And then finally, driving the data that is data that's responsible, that is responsive, instructionally valuable, that is empowering. You know how it happens when your mouth is moving and all these thoughts in your head? Drive. We know that driving is a surefire way to alleviate the pressure and panic. We want data that is responsible and responsive, instructionally valuable, and empowering. That's what it means to drive. So as we wrap up today, want to again invite you to get your book, and then want to just say thank you. And let's see you next week when we are going to extend this conversation. And before I go, a couple of things. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to share, and please leave me a comment. And until next week, thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Power Live.